Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It's 12 o'clock. It's hot. We're standing out in the sun. We want to begin on time. We are to be joined, and there is a problem with Zoom. We are being joined supposedly by people all around the country, including Rabbi Gerald Goldstein in Los Angeles, California. One of those arrested here on June the 18th, 1964. Rabbi Alan Setzer, currently of Whitefish, Montana, also arrested here, and Rabbi Israel Sy Dresner of Wayne, New Jersey, who was with us last night. We're expecting them to join us, but we have a problem with Zoom. We've set aside technology. You come in person. That's a good thing. Again, I'm Merrill Shapiro, Rabbi Merrill Shapiro, the president of the St. Augustine Jewish Historical Society. I serve proudly with board members Simone Browdy-Kilborn, who lived here in 1964, Marcia Grado, our treasurer. I don't know if she is here. Don Hine is here and actually has brochures. I don't even know. If you can't hear me, raise your hand. But then you wouldn't hear me, so you wouldn't be able to raise your hand. But am I loud enough? If not, I can speak more loudly. That's fine. So we have board members Simone Browdy-Kilborn, Marcia Grado, Don Hine. Okay, Lee is always at the ready. Don Hine is here and has brochures about their organization. Larry Cantor, our vice president. Carl Lindenfeld is here. Esther Lindenfeld, among our founders. Robin Shapiro, our secretary, is sitting here. Tammy Schumer, our newest, is she here? Our newest board member. Lee Weaver, who you're going to meet in a little bit. And Nan Weaver is, where's Nan? Is over here. So I'm delighted to be working with them. We are noting today, first, the passing since our last meeting of Mimi Jones. If you're not familiar with who Mimi Jones is, while the rabbis were distracting everybody trying to get into the Monson lunchroom and in the parking lot of the hotel that stood here at the Monson, Mimi Jones was able, and several of her friends were able to get close enough to the swimming pool to jump into the swimming pool. The first people of color to swim in the swimming pool, and there's actually a picture of an officer, St. Johns County Sheriff's deputy, jumping into the pool with his gun, with everything, to get them out. But more importantly, this picture, and I'll pass it around, I have no way to project it, is of Jimmy Brock, the owner and manager of the Monson, pouring muriatic acid into the pool while Mimi Jones was there. And that picture appeared on northern newspapers, increased the pressure on those prosecuting the filibuster of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The filibuster ended the next day because of what happened here, and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 passed the Senate and went on to the signature of President Lyndon Johnson. And so we're acknowledging her, and we're also acknowledging that from this point on, although June 18th, 2022 is on a Saturday, it's on Shabbat, so we'll observe it on the 17th. But this is, in Hebrew, we call it Erev, the eve of Juneteenth Day, a federal holiday as of yesterday, the day before, whatever, as of yesterday. And we will forever be the celebration of the eve of Juneteenth as we gather here each year, and this is our 8th annual gathering to read this letter. I'm delighted to have we're all delighted to have the participation of the NAACP, and I'd like to call on Shelley Ragsdale to give a brief introduction, and we'll get to our main act. Shelley is the president of the Flagler County NAACP.
I think I can go along.
Yeah, I know.
Can you hear me? Yes. All right, I'll talk a little louder. It's a pleasure to be here on this auspicious occasion. Rabbi Merrill Shapiro is a friend of the people.
You're going to need that.
I'm going to need that. He must? Okay, go ahead. Thank you, Lee. I'll start over.
I got to stay close to you.
You got it?
Yeah.
Rabbi Merrill Shapiro is a friend of the people. And we certainly want to acknowledge the part that he's played in the past, working with Dr. Martin Luther King and trying to help him. This occasion does not bring the proper notoriety that it should. And Merrill, you're such a kind individual, and never look for anything but the Flagler County NAACP and the NAACP wants to present you something. I want to bring up my first vice president, Dr. Phyllis Pearson. Doc, come on up, please. Phyllis, I'd like you to read that to the folks, please.
We have a full sound system that is not working today.
Yeah.
Rest of the talk.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon. The NAACP of Flagler Branch presents Rabbi Merrill Shapiro this particular plaque. Sir, in commemoration of the largest mass arrest of rabbis. Rabbi Shapiro was one of 16 rabbis and 4 Jewish divinity scholars arrested with Dr. King. The rabbis attempted to use their bodies to block direct contact between the police and mixed race protesters. This event took place on June 18th, 1964, and there was national news coverage. Again, Flagler County NAACP, June 18th, 2021.
Rabbi?
I thank you very much. I proudly accept this, not on my behalf, but on behalf of the entire St. Augustine Jewish Historical Society that's responsible for this event, this 8th annual reading of the letter. It's really, again, the St. Augustine Jewish Historical Society that makes all this possible.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. I'd like to call on Gail Phillips. How male of you have been to the Lincolnville Museum? Raise your hand. You need to know more about the Lincolnville Museum, and she is going to share with us a bit of correspondence that introduces our letter. Welcome, Gail Phillips.
Yes.
I just want to say thank you to the St. Augustine Jewish Historical Society on behalf of the Lincolnville Museum and Cultural Center here for inviting me to participate in this program today. Our histories are tied together, and hopefully our futures will be tied as well, God willing. So I have 3 letters that I'm going to read to you today. One, the first letter is actually from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference from Dr. Reverend C.T. Vivian. And this letter was dated June 9th, 1964. And it's written to Rabbi Eugene Lippman in Washington, D.C. It says, Dear Rabbi Lippman, your letter to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. dated May 22nd has come to my attention. We're thankful to you for your letter and to know that you are concerned. Could you come to St. Augustine, Florida this week or the first of next week? It's very important that we have as many men as possible in St. Augustine. Please come and bring as many persons as you possibly can. We hope you can join us in our work in St. Augustine. As I say, this was 2 days before Dr. King was arrested at this very location. The day after, Dr. King dictated this letter from the St. Augustine jail. It's written to Rabbi Israel S. Dresner. Dear Cy, I am dictating this letter from the St. Augustine City Jail. It is apparent to you what has been going on here for the past several days. This is the most lawless community in which we have ever worked. Wyatt Walker informed me that he had brought you up to date on the shootings, the beatings, and the burning down of our house here. I understand that last night was the first instance of any semblance of law and order being maintained by the local and state police. I'm writing to you, Cy, because you have been so close to our movement, and Wyatt mentioned that you would be attending your rabbinical assembly next week. I'm very much interested in having a task force from the Reform movement to come to St. Augustine and witness for us for self-respect and human dignity. To witness with us for self-respect and human dignity. It would do much to buttress our efforts here and across the nation. As you know, St. Augustine is the oldest city in the nation and is on the eve of its quadricentennial celebration. Ironically enough, it is 99% segregated, and its main industry is tourism. The Quadricentennial Commission is now asking a federal grant for the celebration. We're determined that the celebration should not take place with the city segregated, and not a single penny of federal money should be used until the city is open to all alike. The local Negro community has been voicing its grievances for nearly 2 years without any respite whatsoever. The attached memo indicates the specific requests that have been made. Perhaps if this letter could be read to your brethren next week, it might be considered a call to St. Augustine. I would imagine that some 30 or so rabbis would make a tremendous impact on this community and the nation. We should hope that some would be prepared to submit to arrest. At the outside, 5 days would be required. Please get word to Wyatt and Andrew Young as soon as possible. Faithfully yours, Martin Luther King Jr. His memorandum, his minimum request, as he said, which was attached to this letter, is 1, all public accommodation open within 30 days. 2, city employment. He was asking for 5 policemen, 4 firemen, and 3 clerical workers within 90 days. The third request was creation of a biracial committee with 2/3 of the Negro members being named by the St. Augustine chapter of the SCLC. 4, dropping the charges against those who have been arrested unconstitutionally. And 5, good faith commitment on the part of the business community to institute employment on merit hiring basis. Now, Lee's going to read you what happened after the rabbis got here, but this is after the fact. This next letter is from July 1st from Dr. King to Rabbi Eugene Lippman again. Dear Rabbi Lippman, this is just a note of acknowledgement receipt of your contribution of $135 for your bail bond in St. Augustine, Florida. Certainly this is greatly appreciated. Let me also express our deep gratitude to you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us in the St. Augustine struggle. You and your fellow rabbis did a great deal to refocus national attention on the St. Augustine situation, and your creative witness did a great deal to project the moral issues involved. We will remain indebted to you for your magnificent expression of support. The situation in St. Augustine is still rather dark and difficult, for the Ku Klux Klan has almost taken over the city. They've succeeded in forcing the moderate leadership into a shell. But there is at least a glimmer of hope in the fact that the White House and the Justice Department are privately pursuing the governor of Florida to do something about the situation. This has led the local white leadership to reconsider the idea of appointing a biracial committee. It seems that this may come through in the next few days. Let me again thank you for your support. Such courage is of inestimable value for the continuance of our humble efforts. Sincerely yours, Martin Luther King Jr.
And thank you, Gail Phillips. And again, if you haven't been to the Lincolnville Museum, go visit Gail there. You can find out more online. We're grateful. We turn next. This is the 8th year in a row that we have read the letter written in jail. It will explain itself. Our reader this year, as is in the past several years, is Lee Weaver, noted playwright, author, and actor. If you haven't seen his one-act play, The Witness, it can be arranged to be brought to you, and he will read to us the letter. By the way, I have not heard the previous letter, but I believe even to this very day, there are not 5 African-American firefighters in certainly in St. Augustine. There are not 3 African-American police officers in St. Augustine 57 years later. Please, Lee Weaver.
So Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. knew something big was going to happen in St. Augustine, and a lot that was already big had happened. He described St. Augustine as the most violent city in the country. Historians might disagree, but they would agree that it's in the top 2 or 3, a violent place, all of Florida at the time. Per capita, from 1860 to 1960, there were more lynchings, necktie parties, shootings, stabbings, burned alive on bonfires, or tied to railroad tracks from 1860 to 1960 than in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama all combined. And so when he heard there was going to be a big thing going on here in St. Augustine, a big protest was going to happen, he got his first lieutenant, Andrew Young, who would go on to distinguish himself as ambassador to the UN under President Carter, who would be the mayor of Atlanta for 2 terms, a House of Representatives delegate, and a clergyman, a brilliant man. He said to him now as a young man, this is when Young was in his 30s, I want you to get down to St. Augustine and stop what they've got planned. We don't need this big a demonstration right now. We're getting close. We don't need anything more there. Just go down there. I don't know what his words were, but we would say just go down there and put a lid on it. Cool it. Those were Young's instructions. And so he flew from Washington to Jacksonville and rented a car, and all the way down, I heard him give this story 8 years ago. He said, all the way to St. Augustine, I was thinking to myself, how am I going to stop them? They're going to want, and anyway, he walked into the church where there were between 200 and 300 people waiting for him, and they all just shouted out, Andy Young is here! Andy's here! Let's go! And their enthusiasm virtually picked him right up, and he was carried out, and before he knows it, he's leading the big protest of 250, give or take, that he was supposed to stop, do you understand? And they made their way from the church to the southwest corner of the Plaza de la Constitucion. And he told them, wait here. I'm going to go over and talk to those boys over there in the slave trading pavilion that we have there now that commemorates where it happened. I'm going to go over there by myself. Don't come over. We're going to keep it calm. And he walked, understand, one of the bravest actions that anybody ever did. He walked into the den of lions, you know, and they were all there. The Klansmen were there, and the other thugs who weren't in the Klan officially, but were doing the Klan's work. He walked up to them, and he stepped up, and they all just looked at him in quiet, and he said, I want to speak to BAM! And they got him from behind. The lead sat right on his head, and down he went out for just a little bit. And he shook it off, and he staggered, and he got to stand up. And bam, again, this time a fist that took him down. And he staggered again, almost out. And then they all fell on him, kicking him in the front, kicking him in the back, kicking him in the head. Before this officer that you heard mentioned, his name was Pettigrew, jumped in and said, all right, let him say his piece. And he stood up and he said what he had to say. And I don't know what he had to say, but that walk over there is what we have remembered. And he walked back to the people. 2 days later, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is coming to St. Augustine. If Young was sent here to cool it, that's not exactly what happened, you see. And King stood on these steps right here that were on the front of the previous building here, the Monson Motor Lodge. And he, with Ralph Abernathy, went up, and they started to come in, and the owner-manager, James Brock, met him right there and said, hold it, fellas, you can't come in here. And understand, this was all being filmed. The media always knew where the protests were going to take place. It was no surprise. So they knew King was going to go there. And King said, I don't know what he said, we just want to have a sweet tea, or maybe, you know, a scent. Nope, you can't come in. This is a segregated restaurant, and so on and so forth. And if you don't go, we're calling the police. Well, we want to come. And they called the police, and they arrested him, and you heard the rest of that. So into the jail he went. So it's while he's in that jail that he wrote, and I'm told he wrote his letter to Cy Dresner just on the margins of newspaper because he didn't have any proper stationery. And then he would get that, and his lawyers would kind of sneak it out so that Cy Dresner could get the letter that said, Cy, why don't you heard it read, why don't you get some of your rabbi friends and come on down and join the party? And they did. 16 of them went all around the front of the Monson Motor Lodge, and the police were called, and they were locked up. The largest mass arrest of rabbis, of Jewish clergy in the history of the United States, and Cy Dresner, of whom you heard read a minute ago. He's the most arrested rabbi who ever lived in the United States. So he wrote the letter, and this is it. They're in jail, the 16th. Dear friend, St. Augustine is the oldest city in the United States. It was here on St. Augustine's Day, August 28th, 1565, that Pedro Menendez de Aviles first sighted land. In 1965, it will celebrate its 400th anniversary. Indeed, it has requested federal funds to enhance this historic observance. St. Augustine has other distinguishing characteristics in American history books yet to be written. This small, neatly kept Florida community will long be remembered as a symbol of the harsh, rigidly segregated, clan-dominated, backward-looking city which mocked the spirit of the doughty, African-born, dark-pigmented priest for whom it was named. St. Augustine is a tourist town. By far the highest percentage of its income comes from the visitors who walk through its quaint streets, staring at excavations from the 18th century, only now being restored. Most visitors stop at the slave market, supposedly only a relic of bygone days. True, they no longer sell slaves in that market, but let no one be deceived into thinking that there no longer exists among this town's white residents the mental attitude and the psychology which first put slaves on those trading blocks. The spirit of racial arrogance persists and is reinforced by the sway of terror long exerted by hooded and unhooded mobsters. We went to St. Augustine in response to the appeal of Martin Luther King addressed to the SACR conference, in which he asked us to join with him in a creative witness to our joint convictions of equality and racial justice. We came because we realized that injustice in St. Augustine, as anywhere else, diminishes the humanity of each of us. If St. Augustine is to be not only an ancient city, but also a great-hearted city, it will not happen until the raw hate, the ignorant prejudices, the unrecognized fears which now grip so many of its citizens are exorcised from its soul. We came then, not as tourists, but as ones who perhaps quixotically thought we could add a little bit to the healing process of America. We were arrested on Thursday, June 18, 1964. 15 of us were arrested while praying in an integrated group in front of Monson's restaurant. 2 of us were arrested for sitting down at a table with 3 Negro youngsters in the Chimes restaurant. We pleaded not guilty to the charges against us. Shortly after our confinement in the St. Johns County Jail, we shared with one another our real inner motives. They are, as might be expected, mixed. We have tried to be honest with one another about the wrong as well as the right motives which have prompted us. These hours have been filled with a sense of surprise and discovery, of fear and affirmation, of self-doubt and belief in God. We came to St. Augustine mainly because we could not stay away. We could not say no to Martin Luther King, whom we always respected and admired, and whose loyal friends we hope we shall be in the days to come. We could not pass by the opportunity to achieve a moral goal by moral means, a rare modern privilege which has been the glory of the nonviolent struggle for civil rights. We came because we could not stand quietly by our brother's blood. We had done that too many times before. We have been vocal in our exhortation of others, but the idleness of our hands too often revealed an inner silence at a time when silence has become the unpardonable sin of our time. We came in the hope that God of us all would accept our small involvement as partial atonement for the many things we wish we had done before, and often. We came as Jews who remember the millions of faceless people who stood quietly while the smoke rose from Hitler's crematoria. We came because we know that second only to silence, the greatest danger to man is loss of faith in man's capacity to act. Here in St. Augustine, we have seen the depths of anger. We have seen the depths of resentment and fury. We have seen faces that expressed a deep, implacable hatred. What disturbs us more deeply is the large number of decent citizens who have stood aside, unable to bring themselves to act, yet knowing in their hearts that this cause is right and that it must inevitably triumph. We believe, though we could not count on it in advance, that our presence and actions here have been of practical effect. They have reminded the embattled Negroes here that they are not isolated and alone. The conscience of the wicked has been troubled, while that of the righteous has gained new strength. We are more certain than before that this cause is invincible. But we also have a sharpened awareness of the great effort and sacrifice which will be required. We pray that what we have done may lead us on to further actions and persuade others who still stand hesitantly to take the stand they know is just. We came from different backgrounds and with different degrees of involvement. Some of us have had intimate experience with the struggle of minority groups to achieve full and equal rights in our widely scattered home communities. Others of us have had less direct contact with the underprivileged and the socially oppressed. And yet, for all of us, these brief, tension-packed hours of openness and communication turned an abstract social issue into something personal and immediate. We shall not forget the people with whom we drove, prayed, marched, slept, ate, demonstrated, and were arrested. How little we know of these people and their struggle. What we have learned has changed us and our attitudes. We are grateful for the rare experience of sharing with this courageous community in their life, their suffering, their effort. We pray that we may remain more sensitive and more alive as a result. We shall not soon forget the stirring and heartfelt excitement with which the Negro community greeted us with full-throated hymns and hallelujahs which pulsated and resounded through the church, nor the bond of affectionate solidarity which joined us hand in hand during our marches through the town, nor the exaltation which lifted our voices and hearts in unison, nor the common purpose which transcended our fears, as well as all the boundaries of race, geography, and circumstance. We hope we have strengthened the morale of St. Augustine. Negroes, as they strive to claim their dignity and humanity, we know they have strengthened ours. Each of us has in this experience become a little more the person, a bit more the rabbi he always hoped to be, but has not yet been able to become. We believe in man's ability to fulfill God's commands with God's help. We make no messianic estimate of man's power, and certainly not of what we did here, but it has reaffirmed our faith in the significance of the deed. So we must confess in all humility that we did this as much in fulfillment of our faith and in response to inner need as in service to our Negro brothers. We came to stand with our brothers, and in the process have learned more about ourselves and our God. In obeying him, we become ourselves. In following his will, we fulfill ourselves. He has guided, sustained and strengthened us in a way we could not manage on our own. We are deeply grateful to the good influences which have sustained us in our moments of trial and friendship. Often we thought of parents, wives, children, congregants, particularly our teenage youth, and of our teachers and students. How many a Torah reading, Passover celebration, prayer book text, and sermonic effort has come to mind in these hours. And how meaningful has been our worship morning and evening as we recited the ancient texts in this new, yet Jewishly familiar setting. We are particularly grateful for what we have received from our comrades in this visit. We have been sustained by the understanding, thoughtfulness, consideration, and good humor we have received from each other. Never have the bonds of Judaism and the fellowship of the rabbinate been more clearly expressed to us all, or more deeply felt by each of us. These words were first written at 3 a.m. in the sweltering heat of a sleepless night by the light of one naked bulb hanging in the corridor outside our small cell. They were ironically scratched on the back of the pages of a mimeographed report of the bloody assaults of the Ku Klux Klan in St. Augustine. At daybreak, we revisited the contents of the letter and prayed together for a new dawn of justice and mercy for all the children of God. We do not underestimate what yet remains to be done in the North as well as the South. In the battle against racism, we have participated here in only a skirmish. But the total effect of all such demonstrations has created a revolution, and the conscience of the nation has been aroused as never before. The Civil Rights Bill will become law, and much more progress will be attained because this national conscience has been touched in this and other places of the struggle. We praise and bless God for his mighty acts on our behalf. Baruch atah Adonai, matir asurim. Blessed art thou, O Lord, who freest the captives. It's signed Rabbi Eugene Borowitz, Rabbi Balfour Brickner, Rabbi Israel Sy Dresner, Rabbi Daniel Fogel, Rabbi Gerald Goldstein, Rabbi Joel Gour, Rabbi Joseph Herzog, Rabbi Norman Hirsch, Rabbi Leon Jick, Rabbi Richard Levy, Rabbi Eugene Lippman, Rabbi Michael Robinson, Rabbi B.T. Rubenstein, Rabbi Murray Saltzman, Rabbi Alan Setcher, Rabbi Clyde T. Sills, and Mr. Albert Vorspan, Director of the Social Action Committee of the Reformed Judaic Movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee, and thank you all for being here. We were asked at the 50th anniversary in 2014, where do we go from here? There is still much to be done. This is not an ending, but a place to begin, to reach out our hands together to make a more just community. We hope you'll leave a comment, visit us, and we'll keep. First of all, Carl Lindenfeld on our board has a sign-in sheet. Please leave us your email address. We ask your phone number only if we can't read the email. We're going to have to call you and ask you what that says in your email address. And let's plan on asking together where we go from here and not stop. But certainly we look forward to seeing you next June 18, 2022 is a Saturday, it's the Sabbath. We'll meet on the 17th. Juneteenth, June the 19th. It's always going to be June the 19th, a day to celebrate as well. And let's give thought to that. We've been standing long enough in the heat. Your being here has great meaning. Be sure to visit the Lincolnville Museum. If you're part of the local NAACP, please support that as well. Think about joining. please, let's go from here and give some thought as to what we can do together to make, again, a more just community. Thank you. By the way, on the 50th anniversary, we blew up part of the handwritten letter and had the 6 rabbis who were here. Only 3 remain living. The 6 rabbis who were here signed that letter. You may want to glance at it. Access to it is also available on our website and on our Facebook page. Thank you so much for being here. Your presence means a great deal. Go in safety. Thank you.
Regina Gail Phillips. I'm director of the Lincolnville Museum and Cultural Center here in St. Augustine in the historic Excelsior High School building.
My first question is, what prompted you to come today?
Well, first of all, I was invited. And second of all, I was going to make a little speech and read Dr. King's letter that we had in our archive, and then Rabbi Shapiro reached out again, and he had the other 2 letters that I read from Reverend Vivian, and the letter from July from Dr. King, which I had not really seen before. So, I wanted to come and share. We've been trying to work with the Historical Society, not as great as we want to, but we will continue to do some joint projects together. We have this story in the Lincolnville Museum, as well as copies of the letter from the 16 rabbis and the arrest records of those rabbis. And, along with our other civil rights history, including the letter that I read today that was dictated from the St. Augustine jail by Dr. King. And so, the history has been combined since before my time. So, we just want to continue that. And I think that the more coalitions we can build as we tell our stories, the better off we are, so that there's not just that we have a shared history, but we have a shared circumstance. We live in a world where we've had a lot of similar kind of injustices against African Americans as well as Jewish people, and our stories have not always been told in the clearest way. So it's up to us to tell those stories and present that history so that it gets perpetuated, which is our mission at the museum. I think unless we know our history, we're destined to repeat it. So if you can't have a conversation about what happened in the past, how are you going to mend where we are now in the future? So the next generation of people may not understand what was happening here in 1963, 64, and beyond. So if we can't share that in a way that shows that, we've overcome that and we can overcome what we're going through now, it helps us to not repeat the exact same thing. But we can bring history, we can bring context to it, we can bring things that did work in the past, and we know that part of that was unity, so that the forces that may be at work within the community, within the world to divide and conquer, they don't have a foothold in the history that we are now making as part of this story, because it continues. It's not over. It's far from over. As we go through history, as you know, that there are so many cycles of the same thing. So we had a civil war, and we had, emancipation, and then we had, a Civil Rights Act that was in the 1860s. Okay, and we had the 13th and the 14th and the 15th Amendment, and we had all these other laws that eroded that, which is what got us to the 1950s and 60s civil rights movement here. And now we're 2021, and we're facing some of the same things as we talk about how we teach that, how we share those stories. And so we have to continue to fight and continue to struggle to make sure that our voices are not being silenced. And what we do at the Lincolnville Museum, what you guys are doing at the Samuel History, Oral History Project, is making sure that those words, those voices are heard, as those historic oral histories are protected and passed on to the next generation, and available in an academic sense, so that others doing research about this 100 years from now, that they'll have something to look back on and, factual documentation. I think just in general, I think that the fact that people are still threatened by the truth of history tells us that we still have a lot of work to do.
Shelley Ragsdale, President of the NAACP for Flagler County.
What prompted you to come today?
From a historical point of view, Rabbi Shapiro has given so much of his life into the dedication of helping other people, specifically for Dr. Martin Luther King. Reverend King has always been a bulwark in the work that he's done for civil rights. So for me to spend some time here on these historic ground, the steps that I stood on over there were the same steps that were stood on in the year of 1964. The ground that we're standing on, which is now bricked, this used to be the swimming pool where the acid was poured into the water on unsuspecting African American people.
How do you think commemorating events like this helps a community?
Well, I think it brings awareness. People are not aware of things. They don't have an opportunity to respond to it. By bringing awareness to this situation, especially on a historic day where tomorrow is Juneteenth, and today or yesterday, President Biden ratified it and made it a legal holiday. We have two steps. It's a legal holiday, but we need to make it federal and national. So being here and working on that, it's only going to help bring awareness to a situation that has been swept under the rug.
Do you think the message from 1964 and the rabbis' participation in the protest is relevant today?
Oh, it's certainly relevant today. The sad part about it is that you can go back 40, 50, 60 years, the same things that we're talking about then, we're talking about today. And that's why the awareness is not as prevalent as it should be. In order for us to have a homogeneous society where we all mix and blend in, awareness. We must make each other aware. And this particular day is just a small part of that. And I think we should all work on doing that, making us more aware, not one day, but every day. Well, I'd just like to say on behalf of the University of Florida, I thank you for being here and also for making people more aware of what's going on. I like to use one word, and it begins with the E. It's called equality. We must make equality a point for everybody to feel and share the same thing. Okay? Democracy is only as good as the laws that protect us.
What prompted you to come today?
Well, I have read the letter from that the rabbis wrote for several years. I'm on the board of directors of the St. Augustine Jewish Historical Society. I think it's worth mentioning here that I'm not Jewish, but I'm a board of directors, and that's how boards should be. They're not trying to keep up people. They're trying to get people in who have something to contribute. And my wife and I are both on the board of directors. Why did I come here today? Because my board said, we want you to read the letter again, and I'm happy to do it. I'm a performer, I'm an actor, and my wife and I do 3 shows a month all over, so this is just like getting up in the morning, rolling out of bed to read that.
Are you from St. Augustine?
No, I moved here 20 years ago. I had a vacation home here prior to that for 10 years, but I'm from up north. I'm upstate New York near Niagara Falls and Buffalo, and my wife is from the Bronx. But we are, it said in the play last night, we're not just the Yankees, we're the damn Yankees. We moved here and stayed, and that's from the play. Yes.
Well, here's a question for you. Do you remember hearing any stories about the rabbi's arrest in 1964 prior to coming here?
No, I didn't until my involvement here in this. I keep mentioning the play that I did last night. It's on the race relations, the civil rights movement, and I immersed myself in all I could read and study on that 10 years ago when I was starting to write this redemption series. But I was no authority on stuff. Now I know quite a bit.
Well, let's see. How do you think commemorating events like this can help a community.
I think it's critical. You know, there are revisionist historians who are now saying the Holocaust wasn't that bad. It might not have been 6 million people. It might have been 2 million. It might have been 500,000. It's just not that bad. But we got to keep telling that story because we got to keep it right. The same thing applies to what we're going through in St. Augustine and the country regarding civil rights. We've got to keep telling the story over and over. If we don't know our history, we are what? Doomed to repeat it. And this is part of the history of St. Augustine. And don't think for a minute that it couldn't happen again or something like that. The Klan still meets in St. Augustine every month. Didn't know that.
I did not.
I'm always a little bit worried, and my wife says, keep your eyes out when you're performing this particular play, because you just don't know.
Wow.
I thank you for being here and sharing whatever you got with whomever is going to see it. This is a big event for the town, just this little attended event here.
Well, thank you very much for participating today, and thank you for your reading. It was really good.
Wow. It's a great letter, isn't it?